Welcome. This is a tutorial on solving by undoing, which is a great skill that you need for Algebra 2, Algebra 1. Anytime you're solving for x, this applies. So I want to start off with an analogy before we do the actual problem. And that is, this is Happy Bob. Say hi. Happy Bob got dressed in the morning and put on three things. He put on a blue t-shirt, and then over the t-shirt, he put on a red sweatshirt. And then over the red sweatshirt, you put on a green jacket. Now, if you want to undo all this stuff and take off his clothes, you have to get the outside layer off first and then work your way to the inside layer. So first you have to remove the green layer. After the green coat's removed, you can go for the next layer would be red. And then finally, the last layer to remove would be the blue t-shirt. But you got to go from the outside layer to the inside layer to get Happy Bob back by himself. And once you've done those layers in that order, Happy Bob's happy and he can go take a shower, whatever he wants to do, and he's good to go. So that's the concept. Let's go ahead and apply it now to this problem. And believe it or not, that analogy does carry directly to these problems. In fact, anything when you're solving for x, this really applies. So next, looking at the problem, we have to decide what's the outsidemost layer you have to undo. Well, what's the furthest from x? And most students will say 25 is, and you're right, 25 is the farthest from x. But look, 25 is already on the other side. Your goal is to get, remember, you want to isolate x. Well, if 25 is already on the right-hand side, you don't need to worry about the 25. The 25 is already pushed away from x as far as possible. You want to get rid of the 4, the square root, the times by 3, the 1, the negative 4. Those are the things that you have to undo. So we got to figure out what's the outsidemost layer on this side of the equal sign. Well, it'll be the 4. The 4 is the outsidemost piece. So to undo it, we always do opposites. In this case, we'll subtract 4 from both sides of the equation. And a positive 4 or negative 4 will cancel out. 25 minus 4 is 21. And there's our first step. We've undone the 4, which was the outsidemost layer. Left over is 3 times the square root of 1 minus 4x. Parentheses are not needed at this point, just everything's inside the square root. Now what's the next layer to undo? Can you touch the 1, the 4? Well, think about it. You can't touch the inside stuff until you remove the outside layer of the parenthesis, or the square root. And the square root, you shouldn't really undo until you get rid of the 3, because the 3 is more outside than the square root is. So let's first figure out, how can we undo this 3? Well, I see this by students are like, oh, well, 3, just subtract it. Cool. Well, you'll be wrong. And the only reason that you're wrong is because 3 is not being added to this stuff. 3 is being multiplied to the square root. So you have to unmultiply 3. And so instead of subtracting, you need to divide both sides by 3 to get rid of the multiplication. So this times by 3 needs a division to cancel out. And 21 divided by 3 is 7. So we're down to this. This side is 7. The left-hand side is now down to the square root of 1 minus 4x. And now the next layer to peel off is the square root. So you have to know, what's the inverse of a square root? What will undo a square root? Well, the inverse of a square root is a power of 2. So these guys go together. A squared of x and x squared, those are called inverse operations. It's kind of like the same thing as opposite operations, but the true word is inverse. So these are inverses and they do the exact opposite. So here, to cancel the square root, we will square this side, and what you do to one side, you must do to the other side, square. Now the square and square root cancel out. Left over is 1 minus 4x. 7 squared is 49. And the same thing continues. We got to figure out what's the next piece to undo. So say goodbye to Happy Bob as I erase him here. So most likely from here, you're good to go. But let's keep doing it as if we didn't know what to do. What's the next outside layer to remove? The 4 or the 1? Well, the 1 is definitely farther on the outside compared to x. So we have to remove the 1. And to remove it, we will need to subtract. So it'll be switch pin colors. Subtract 1, because 1's basically being added to this stuff. Subtract 1 here. That way the 1's cancel out, because this was a positive 1 being added to this stuff. Those cancel. 49 minus 1 is 48, so we have left over negative 4x equals 48. And finally, we have negative 4's being multiplied to x, so to unmultiply, we have to divide. So we'll divide negative 4 to both sides to cancel out the multiplication, or to undo it. And what you do to one side, do to the other side too. Those guys undo each other, and the final answer is whatever 48 divided by 4 is. In that case, it would be negative 12 is our final answer. Done. Let's go on to problem B. So here's problem B. Let me get all the stuff undone here. Alright, good enough. Alright, problem B. What's the outsidemost piece to undo? Let's compare. So squared is trapping everything inside. So you definitely can't do things like this. You can't subtract 8 until you get rid of the square first. And the square, you can't get rid of that until you get rid of the 6. The 6 is the outsidemost piece. So let's undo the outside layer first and subtract 6 to both sides. Subtract 6, subtract 6. Okay. Now that you subtracted the 6 and got those cancel, left over is x plus 8 to the power of 2, and then equals 55 minus 6 is 49, so we're down to this guy. Alright, now we need to undo the square. So to unsquare things, you square root them. Square root there, square root there. And now the square and the square root cancel out. Cool. Left over is x plus 8. And now is a finer detail that you need to remember. Whenever you square root a square, there are two possible answers. The square root of 49 is 7, but in this case it'll be plus or minus 7, because there's two possibilities. The short reason for this is, let's do a simpler problem. Let's say I just had x squared equals 49 by itself. Well, think about it. There are two numbers that when you square equal 49. X could equal 7 because 7 squared is 49, or x could equal negative 7 because if you square negative 7, a negative times a negative is a positive. So there are two possibilities when squaring, positive or negative, whatever. In our case, plus or minus 7. So now, final thing to undo is to get rid of the 8, and to get rid of the 8, since it's being added, we have to subtract. So subtract 8 to both sides. Subtract 8. And final answer is this guy. X equals, these cancel out. The easiest way to write this is just put, for now, put positive or negative 7, then minus 8. So x equals either positive or negative 7, minus 8. And now from here, we got to branch out into our two possibilities. So if x could equal positive or negative 7, you have two cases to consider. Case number 1 would be, what if x equals positive 7, and then minus 8? Well, if that were the case, 7 minus 8 is negative 1, so that's one possible answer. We need to consider the other possibility. If 7 is negative, here's the other case. If x equals negative 7, and then minus 8, we get an answer of negative 7 minus 8 is negative 15. So there are our two possibilities, and done. That's it for this video. There are two more problems in this series, so I'll continue with part B in just a second.